Now that the floodwaters have receded, we've begun the debate again over what needs to be done, especially in Sydney, to prevent flood disasters from impacting on so many properties and people. Both the state and federal government seem frozen in time on what needs to be done, especially over the push to raise the wall of Warragamba Dam by 14 metres, which under recent flood levels could prevent 7,000 homes from flood damage. But are there far more inexpensive options which could be enacted in the short to medium term? The leader of One Nation in New South Wales, Mark Latham, has worked in this space as a local council mayor and has seen how successful relocation projects can be in the most flood-affected areas. He joins us now. Mark Latham, welcome to the show.
Thanks very much, Chris.
I want to ask you about, firstly, the dam. Everyone seems to be on raising the dam, but that is a monstrous investment to be behind. It's billions and billions of dollars, and then there are green offsets to be made in the billions and billions of dollars again. You think we can go in a different direction, do you?
Yeah, raising the dam wall, it's edging up to $2 billion, plus there'll be enormous dislocation costs because there is a township, there is a community that lives at Warragamba, and they're very worried about how the construction project, which would be enormous, would pretty well close down their town, particularly the commercial centre. So there are costs up front, there are costs for the Warragamba community, there are costs in the green offsets you've mentioned. And of course, there's no guarantee that lifting the dam wall 14 metres stops the floods in the Hawkesbury district. A parliamentary committee had extensive examination of this issue, and they said the evidence was ambivalent. And one of the reasons, of course, is that, Chris, when you see all that floodwater at Camden in the southwest of Sydney, that flows down the Nepean. And there's no dam on that. The Warragamba Dam's on the Warragamba catchment. It doesn't stop the enormous waters that come down through the Nepean system. So what do? I'm an advocate for a voluntary acquisition scheme, because the reality is that these homes were built in a flood-prone area when they shouldn't have been. Local authorities back in the day should never have allowed these homes and properties to be in flood areas. And the precedent is the Milperra voluntary acquisition scheme on the other side of the river from Bankstown, between Bankstown and Chipping Norton, where people were allowed, given the opportunity to sell their property to government. It was 40% federal funded, 40% state, 20% local government.
Right.
And those properties were acquired and got people out of harm's way. It was a great success. And I think that's more cost effective than the billions we're talking about for raising the dam wall at Warragamba.
Well, I could imagine that Dominic Perrottet and his Labor opposite, Chris Minns, wouldn't have even been in the parliament. They may have even been at school when all of this took place. Maybe they need to go back in history and learn some lessons from what you experienced in Milperra.
Well, it was a great success. Not everyone wanted to be part of the scheme. Some people felt they liked the river view there of the Georges River, just opposite the Bankstown Airport. And they were up 2 stories and they got used to the floods and had a safe way of getting onto the second story of their home and had no problem dealing with the flood below. So not everyone joined it, but those who did, their homes were knocked down. It became open space. And when you see the floodwaters at Milperra now, nobody's in harm's way. So if the objective is to get people out of harm's way, then the cost-effective way is a voluntary acquisition scheme funded by all 3 levels of government. Give people the choice. Do you want to go, or have you arrangements here where you feel safe? And I think that's a pretty good option for the property owners.
Premier, take note. By the way, for an up-close and personal look at how the floods impacted that part of Sydney, make sure you watch Erin after my show this evening. She visited the Hawkesbury community earlier in the week, and it's quite an insight. Finally, Mark, just on interest rates, the bubble building in the United States is quite concerning, and I notice the banks here have now shifted their fixed home loans to between 5 and 6%. So what do you read from that? Will the ceiling end up being here, and what must the feds do to lower it?
Well, the problem we've got is the Reserve Bank was asleep at the wheel late last year, Chris. I'm surprised there's not more criticism of this. Peter Costello's made the point, and he was 100% right, that if you couldn't see inflation pressures coming at the end of last year, you weren't looking. And the fact that the Reserve Bank here didn't act earlier now means we will have more and bigger interest rate rises as a result. And the lesson for government is the inflation bear is out of its cage. It's the number one enemy on economic policy. And we've got to bring federal and state budgets under control. I mean, the Perrottet-Keane government here in New South Wales has racked up $182 billion in gross debt. Morrison left $1 trillion of debt behind. This is all fueling further inflation, further interest rate rises. And the sooner we get back into the business of a surplus budget, federal and state, that's the only time really you'll get some relief from these interest rate rises.
Good to get your insight, especially on the economics of it all, because it impacts so many people. Mark Latham, thank you very much for your time.
Thanks, Chris.